guys, thanks very much for joining me for my last monthly read of the year. This is my December reads. I hope you guys all had a great Christmas, have a good New Year's, good end to 2023. I have 7 books, I think, that I read this month. We're going to go ahead and get into them. Charles is over here destroying all of his Christmas toys. This is like the 4th one in like 3 days that he's ripped all the stuffing out of. Did you kill another toy, Charles? Yeah, not guilty at all. Anyway, let's get into, as we always do, kind of my least favorite first. On the bottom, I have 3 books that are tied for last place. Really unfortunate because these books have been on my TBR for such a long time. I wanted to like them and I expected to like them way more than I did, but that's just what happens sometimes. So we have The Hazelwood. Beautiful, beautiful book. The second book in the series is kind of, well, it's not the second book, it's between the first and the second. It's a novella. It's called The Boy Who Didn't Come Home. I don't physically have that, but I did listen to that as an audiobook. And then this is the second book, The Night Country. Also a really beautiful book. These books are kind of marketed as fantasy. They follow a girl named Alice who, because of her familial connections a few generations back, she's able to gain access and venture into this kind of magical realm that's connected to this world. I love being immersed in this kind of supernatural realm that you can find different pathways to through this world. But as a fantasy book, I will say the fantasy elements did not start until like over halfway through the first book, which I was really expecting it to happen sooner. And even after the supernatural or the magic, whatever you want to call it, has been revealed, in the second book, I was like, okay, it's fine. We'll get into it a lot faster. Nope. Still about halfway through before anything like really magical starts to happen. That was my first issue with the books. The second problem I had with the books is the main protagonist of Alice. Alice is purposefully made to be a very unlikable character, and we do find out the reason for that character trait at the end of this book, so it does make sense. But at the end of the day, she's still a really unlikable character. I just didn't have much empathy for her. I didn't like being in her head. I didn't like following her around. I just kind of wanted to focus on someone else. Basic plot of the book. Alice grows up with her mother, Ella, and they are always on the move, and they seem to be followed by bad luck. Alice's grandmother is a very secretive woman. Alice has never met her. She wrote a book called Tales from the Hinterland, which is a very famous book, but for some reason, you'll find out later, no one ever really is able to find these books. They're very, very rare, very difficult to get a hold of. One day, Ella is kidnapped and Alice sets out to find her, and she has to go through the Hazelwood, through this kind of magical realm, figure out what's going on, how it was created, what part she plays in it. I think the third issue I had with the books was the actual magical worlds themselves. So the Hazelwood and the Night Country, they just did not feel very fleshed out to me. You know how some authors become so immersed in creating their worlds that you have a feeling that they know what's going on everywhere in the world, like not just the scene that they're writing, but they can tell you what's happening down the street or across the country. The worlds in these books just did not feel very fleshed out. It kind of felt like the author focused on the parts that she needed to write, and then everything else was kind of a blank. It's really unfortunate because I feel like the author did have some really unique ideas and spins on creating these worlds, and what does it mean to write your own tale, and can someone fated in a book kind of change their own story? Can you reverse your role? Stuff like that. I really would have enjoyed if I didn't have all these kind of other issues with the books. The same things that I didn't like about this one were present in this one. So I'm glad I read them, and maybe I'm being a bit harsher because they were hyped up to me a bit. I try not to take that into account, but who knows, that could be a factor. In the end, these just were not for me, so. Next on the list, we have The House on Mongo Street. This is a classic book. I could have sworn I read it before, but if I did, I didn't remember anything about it. So just in case I hadn't read it, I wanted to make sure I did go through it. The book focuses on a young girl, Esperanza, as she is growing up poor in Chicago. Lots of topics are discussed in the book, like family, community, immigration, poverty. It does a really good job of capturing childhood in a lot of ways. Because it is considered such a classic, I think I was expecting it to stand out a bit more, or for certain passages to hit me a little bit harder. It didn't blow me away. It didn't let me down. It was just kind of like, here's a good book. Next book, we have Intimations by Zadie Smith. This is the first Zadie Smith book I read, but I do have several of her other works on my TBR shelf. She is one of those authors that I just love listening to interviews of her because she is so like effortlessly intelligent. This is pretty much a series of vignettes she wrote during quarantine. Some of the subjects she explores includes contempt, privilege, filling time, which is probably my favorite story in this one. There are so many essays out there written about COVID that most of what you read in here you have heard many times before. Some of the reflections are more enjoyable than others, but I think it's worth a read. It's very short as well, so you can get through it in no time. Number 2 book on the list, we have The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn. This was a very pleasant surprise. I had only ever read Gone Girl by this author, and I didn't like it that much, so this was definitely an improvement for me. The story follows our narrator, who is a young woman who I don't think is ever given a name. She worked initially as a sex worker and then committed certain types of fraud to get by. She settles into fortune telling. One day she meets a woman named Susan who believes her house is haunted. Seeing this as an opportunity to make some money, she says, "Of course I can help you. I'll come over and I will cleanse your house." When that doesn't seem to work and these problems persist, Susan thinks that her son Miles might be the actual issue. Miles is a creepy little boy. For a while, we don't know if there's something supernatural going on in the book or not, but there is this kind of sense of escalating dread. The end was not at all what I expected it to be. Lots of twists and turns, really good. Again, I read a lot of kind of shorter books in December. This will take you no time at all to get through. It was just a fun little journey. Number 1 book for this month is The Power by Naomi Alderman. This is a book that kind of takes typical gender roles and flips it on its head. When young girls develop the ability to shock, electrify people, females become the dominant gender. Hearing that, you might assume that this is kind of a revenge story of women against men, but that's very much not what it is. I think I spoke earlier this year about When Women Were Dragons, and it's the same thing where I expected it to be like almost as like men are bad, women get their revenge, like type of thing. And it's way too complicated for that. We have 4 main characters, all different POVs. They're all from different backgrounds, upbringing, countries. And one is a man and 3 are women. It's interesting in the book how certain countries are the first to have these major changes, where there's a lot of sex trafficking going on, or where there's a lot of oppression on women, like in the Middle East. Those countries go through these radical changes really quickly, while a lot of other countries, it's a lot more subtle to see. The book is definitely uncomfortable to read at times, but I think it does so many interesting things with gender and with power. It shows how in this new world, kind of men are the ones who have to walk in groups at night, who are uncomfortable being alone. Terrible things happen, and it's not pleasant at all to read, and it's very shocking. But I think it's, as I was reading it, I remember coming to this realization that, like, okay, these are things that we hear about happening to women every day, all across the world in the news. But when it's happening to men, it seems so much more like horrific and shocking. The male protagonist, I think his name is Tunde, is a very likable, like a good guy. So it prevents it from being just like, we're getting revenge on all these terrible, terrible men. It shows how terrible things happen to innocent men as well. I found it really thought-provoking. I quite liked it. So that's it. Those are the books I read in December. Next time I see you guys, it will be 2024. Fingers crossed I will start strong in January, but I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Bye.